So welcome to another Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram, and today I'm joined by Romain. So Romain, do you want to just introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Romain. I'm working as a staff TPM in the VCPP team.
So it's a technical product marketing for those who don't know what TPM is, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I focus mainly on networking and security.
You are the guru for networking and security. And my name is Guy Bartram, for those who don't know me. I'm Director of Product Marketing in our Cloud Services Business Unit. And today we're going to talk about the NSX migration tool, and hence why we have the expert here today, and the new release of the NSX migration tool, specifically 1.2. So Romain, first of all, let's start with a bit of a reset. What is the migration tool all about?
So to introduce the migration tool, I will just use a slide that I have, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It will be helpful to use as a support. I guess you see the correct screen.
No problem. Yep.
Okay. So in terms, when you have NSX-V, or so NSX for vSphere and NSX-T, there are multiple scenarios that you can approach to migrate. Depending on your context, you have to use one or the other. Including in NSX-T, you have the migration coordinator that is an in-place migration, and then you have like coexistence or lift and shift. But those three first scenarios on the left, so the three on the left, they don't understand the VCD concept. So they are not aware that VMware Cloud Director is providing an abstraction layer on top of NSX. So that's why we have the NSX migration for Cloud Director, which basically is a mixture of the migration coordinator and the lift and shift. So you have a side-by-side clusters, NSX-V clusters and NSX-T destination clusters. And the NSX migration for Cloud Director tool automates the application of the topology and establish a L2 bridging in software to maintain east-west traffic during the migration, and migrate the workload using vMotion and storage vMotion if required.
Okay, so target environment must be all completely set out with NSX-T, and from what I understand, then there's no downtime during the migration of the VMs.
It's a limited downtime. It's always hard to say that there is no downtime, but it's a couple of minutes.
Okay.
It's just the way the tool is working is that to maintain the state of the migration, somewhere it uses metadata in VCD.
Yeah.
And because of the north-south switching between NSX-V and NSX-T, and the metadata of writing at that moment, we currently have a couple of minutes of downtime, but still it's pretty good compared to everything that the tool is doing for you.
So when we're talking about downtime here, we're talking about network outage rather than downtime of the VM.
Exactly. So the VM remains up, and I can show in the demonstration that actually my SSH session, they don't close. So I remain connected to my servers. But yeah, you have some network connectivity downtime.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense.
So the granularity is important. So it's still an org. So it's a per organization VDC migration. So it's to limit the maintenance window. So you only focus at really migrating one org VDC at a time. When you are done, you rinse and repeat, and you start again with a new org VDC.
Okay.
And the first version of this was released in April last year, 1.0. And then we had a new one in September or October, 1.1. And here we have the 1.2, which was weighted by a lot of people in the field. So in 1.1, we had some support for some topologies and some features. One of the main caveat was that we only supported a single edge gateway in the org VCD,
right,
and a single external network. So that's fixed now with the 1.2 release. We also introduced support for the latest version of VCD and NSX-T and NSX-V. And so now what was released actually last night, so that's like really fresh. It's this 1.2 release. We support now multiple edges connected to one or multiple external networks. So you can have the combination: one edge, one external network, two edge, each to one external network, or one edge to multiple external networks. You can combine how you want.
Good. Okay. Yeah, it's gonna be useful.
Yeah, and we also support the new features that were introduced with VCT 10.2, which are distributed firewall on NSX-T, VRF support, and we also migrate NSX-V load balancing directly to NSX Advanced Load Balancer, so the RA product.
Okay. Okay. So you get the all of the existing firewall rules, all of the existing VRF, well, routing that is there on the edge, and all of the load balancing configuration in terms of the VIPs and everything else. That all just gets moved across.
Yeah, for VRF, it's just the support, as we support VRF as an external network in the destination. There is no concept of VRF in NSX-V, so
yeah, that's right.
It's just how we translate the source topology into the destination topology. And when you have a source edge gateway on NSX-V that has, for example, a connection to an external network where you need to provide fully routed topology, well, the only supported destination is a dedicated external network. And with VRF, instead of dedicating a complete T0, you can dedicate just a VRF.
Yeah, yeah. So you could add multiple routes into that VRF.
Yes.
Multiple external networks, and a VRF then is assigned to a tenant organization.
To a tenant, not to an edge gateway.
Edge gateway.
So,
okay.
Yes, it's really a one-to-one relationship between the edge gateway and the VRF gateway, which is the provider construct.
Okay. Cool. All right. So how does where would someone go and get the 1.2 script from? Oh, there you go. Brilliant.
It's quite easy. It's actually if you're entitled to VCD, you just go to VMware.com downloads to the VCD page, download page, and you just go to the drivers and tools tab, and here you go.
Perfect.
So in that, so if you go to download for that 1.2 version, you will find there two binaries, one for Windows to execute the migration tool on Windows, and one for Linux. And you will also find release notes and the user guide, which is quite extensive. It's like quite long.
So this is something that you're going to execute then from your workstation and point out your VCD instance and NSX instances.
Yeah, we support some operating systems. It's provided as a binary to you, but it's actually written in Python, so you can execute from Linux and Windows. We have some officially supported operating systems like CentOS, Red Hat, Windows, and some versions of Windows. But technically, you can just execute from anywhere, Linux or Windows. Usually, I advise to have a dedicated server to do that, not really your workstation that can, I don't know, break, or you can have a power outage if it's not a laptop, or anything that can break the migration. Although the migration tool is well behaving if you have an outage, because it knows the state of the migration at every time, because it writes the state where it is during the migration in metadata. You can just, if it fails, if you relaunch the migration, it will just resume where it stopped. So it's still good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So do we have a look at it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's my VCD. If I remember correctly, it's 10.2.1. Yes.
Yep.
So the latest version. I have an organization which is named T1. And for that, I have a single org VDC, which is NSX-V backed. In that org VDC, I will just connect with the tenant view. I have one VApp. So for the purpose of the demo, it's quite simple, but I have one VApp, which is app XYZ, that has two VMs. Those are two web servers on Photon OS. They are running each a web server. I have one edge that has some centralized services configured, such as NAT to access the servers, load balancing, and firewall. So that's the firewall piece. For the NAT, I have some destination NAT, so to access both servers directly for management, for example. And one source NAT to allow the VMs to go out, and one destination NAT, which is automatically created by the load balancer, because I have actually a load balancer configured. So I have one virtual server on the IP 1067.29.110. And the pool is actually the two members. It's the two VMs that I have in my OVDC.
Yep.
And lastly, I have configured DFW, so distributed firewall in the source OVDC with a few rules. I allow incoming HTTP. I allow DB traffic, so I don't have any DB server right now, but it's just to show how it's translated. Yeah, and I allow the management, so myself accessing in SSH the web servers and able to do a ping ICMP. And everything else is denied. So this is applied to the complete OVDC in source. And just to show you,
so this is pretty much a full NSX-V kind of configuration. The main pieces in any case,
Yeah, it's a mock-up of not all, but like a big chunk of what you can do with NSX-V.
Yeah.
So my two web servers, one is Web 01, the other one is Web 02. So the IP address, so this one has 192.168.10.2. So if I ping the other one, or from the other one, so this one is 10.3. So if I ping 192.168.10.2, so the other server, DFW is denying, so it's dropping the traffic between. So the both VMs are running on the same ESXi host in the source or VDC, and they are connected to the same logical segment. But distributed firewall denies the traffic between both web servers, which is useful if you want to prevent lateral spread if one of the web server is compromised or others. So that's it. And my demo application is quite simple. So that's the VIP of the load balancing, 110. So it's a switching between both servers. Just to show you Web 2, Web 1, Web 2, Web 1, and so on. So it's switching between both servers.
Okay. And you can ping from your management address, right? Because the management rule let through ICMP.
Yeah. Cool. So the migration tool, which is provided as a zip package or a tar package for Linux, when you extract it, it's a folder. In the folder, you have a default YAML file, which is named, I never remember, sample user input. Which is the YAML file that describes the migration. So what you want to migrate, what are the source objects, and what destination NSX-T objects components we should use. So that's the sample that you can use, just adapt it for your migration. In my case, I have one that is already described in my migration. So my organization, so it's T1, the OVDC is T1 OVDC1, and then I provide like how I want to translate that OVDC into a destination NSX-T OVDC. So I provide some, for example, the provider VDC name, so that's the NSX-T cluster, the external networks that I need, that I will use. Here I provided a shared one, but I can specify a VRF dedicated external network,
Right.
and so on. Load balancer, for the load balancer, you just specify the RV, so the NSX-ALB service engine group that you have imported in VCD here. And then you have some credentials, how to do the bridging, and that's it.
I guess if you wanted to, you could parameterize these and put them in a parameter file for execution, or if you
Well,
wanted to do
that's already the execution parameter file for execution. So I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
It could be dangerous.
Yeah, I wouldn't try to. It's a migration. So a migration, it's not an update. It's not a patch update. So workloads will be migrated. You have some topology that have to be replicated and so on. So
yeah,
even running multiple migration at the same time in parallel, I would not recommend doing that. So
yeah,
just do one org VDC after the other, or if you are well organized and if you are multiple people and the environment is large enough, you can try to do in parallel multiple ones. But yeah. So to execute the migration, you just provide, so it's a binary, you provide some arguments. So the file path, that's the input YAML file. Password file, just for the sake of time for this demo, I'm providing a password file, but if you don't provide that, it will ask for passwords. And I want, yeah, I don't want to do a pre-check because I already did it before the demo, and it's doing a pre-check before running the actual migration, no matter if you want to run it or not.
Is that so checking here, the source and destination stuff exists?
So it checks two things. If source and destination objects exists, the one that you provided in the YAML file. Mm-hmm. The second is if you are not running an unsupported feature, like independent name disks or VMs with snapshots or like suspended VMs with a media connected, things like that. So it will check everything.
Right.
And so here it's validating. So I think we are almost at the end. And it will start creating new NSX-T objects. So it's starting by disabling the source or VDC. Then it will query a few metadata and update the metadata for the source or VDC to keep the state of the migration. And then it will create destination or VDC, replicate the topology, establish layer 2 bridging, move the workloads, and then it stops. After it stops, you have the opportunity to check if everything is okay. Mm-hmm. But NSX-V components still exist, like the source or VDC, it will be empty, but it still exists. If it's okay, you can just run the tool again with cleanup, the cleanup argument, and then it will clean, it will destroy layer 2 bridging, it will destroy the source NSX-V objects, and it will rename the destination objects. So here it's running, it's...
yeah. How long can you leave that running both source and destination for? And practically, you probably don't want to do it for too long, do you?
No, I would not recommend like keeping that for days, because you still have like layer 2 bridging established between different clusters, and we are actually bridging VXLAN into Geneve directly. Mm-hmm. So it's not that at some point it will stop working or it will break something. It's never good because of layer 2 domains, broadcasts, and other things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So just once, yeah.
As I say, so you do once the migration is complete, then do the checks as quickly as you feasibly can, and then run the cleanup operation.
Yeah, you're not in a hurry.
Yeah.
But like, don't wait for the next payroll or something.
Yeah. Sure.
And I just wanted to mention how we do the NSX-V load balancing directly to RV load balancing. Just like NSX-T, you have to provision, to deploy and to configure some RV resources before the migration if you want to migrate load balancing. If you don't have load balancing in the source or VDC, you don't have to do that. So I have an RV instance that is deployed, that is configured to interact with VCD. And then I just have everything imported into VCD. So I have my RV controller here, which is licensed for enterprise. I imported my NSX-T cloud. That's how RV is talking to NSX-T to automate logical segments creation, how to connect to the edge gateway and so on. And there I have multiple edge service engine groups, depending on if I want to have them in active standby, if I want to have some that are dedicated. So you see the column shared.
Yeah.
I have a cross for that one. So that means that this one that is appended with dash DED is dedicated. So those are namings that I defined here.
Okay.
In my case, I will migrate them to that. So it will just, when the migration tool will create the destination of VDC, create the destination edges, it will activate load balancing on that edge, and it will connect that service engine group to the edge.
So you need to make sure you have enough cores available in your service engine group to specify the number of VMs that you're going to be load balancing for. Would that be or the amount of throughput that you're expecting?
Yes, but you have to do that upfront to have the correct service engine group configuration. The service engine group configuration is basically how to group service engine to define them HA modes and what kind of, how many virtual services they can provide, and resources that they have, like how many CPUs and memory and disks each have, and how they scale together in the same group. Is it active-active or N plus M, which is a scale-out mechanism? Is it active standby, which is like just like NSX-V? It's one is you have two VMs and one virtual server is active on one VM and is standby on the other VM.
Right.
And
but these number of service cores that get consumed, is that going to be dynamically created in the group as you migrate the load balancing function over?
Yes.
Okay. That's fine. And so you don't have to really worry about the amount of throughput you're going to be putting on that load balancer. You just, you can ignore that as long as you've got the group set up.
I can show you the configuration. Don't pay attention to the red warnings and everything that I have, because I was doing some other tests. I just have to remember the password. It's not that one. It's not a good correct password. It's the demo effect.
Yeah.
So that's some tests that I'm doing. But in RV, I have defined for my NSX-T cloud. Here you will find the 3 service engine groups that I have imported into VCD. And so we can see that this one
shared has 2,
this one has 2. You can provide a maximum number of service engines and the number of virtual services that are running. So if I take this one, for example, that's active standby, and I allow a maximum of 10 virtual service per service engine. And here I define the memory and the CPU and the disk per service engine.
Okay, and wasn't there something around the number of service engines equating to the number of edges that you had? I'm sure there was a max of 9, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, there is because the service engines are technically virtual machines that are running on an NSX-T cluster. Those are VMs, and every time we connect a service engine from the service engine group to an edge gateway, it's actually adding a different logical segment to that edge. We already consume one by default for management, so you can add a service engine can only be configured to 9 different edge gateway.
Okay, cool. So when you're doing the migration, and is that a consideration to make sure you have enough service engines for the number of edges that you're going to be migrating that are load balancing?
Sorry, can you repeat
So
that?
I'm trying to understand this. So when you're doing the migration, you're doing the migration of edges that are providing load balancing function today into AVI. And what you need to make sure in AVI is that you've got enough service engines to migrate those edges into, if that makes sense, or to take on that load balancing function.
No, yeah. If you're consuming, it depends on the mode that you have. If you have a service engine group that is configured as active standby, you will have a maximum of 9 edges connected to the group.
Right. So it's to the group, right? So
yeah, to the group.
Yeah. So then okay. So then I've got to make sure I've got enough groups to cope for the number of edges I'm going to be migrating. Got it. Right.
But if you have an N+M or active mode, the service engine group will just scale up to the maximum number of service engines that you defined in the group. So if in the group you say that the maximum number of service engine is 100, it will scale to 100 service engines VMs.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so that's not an issue in that scenario.
Yeah. So our migration is running. So that's my source edge, T1 over DC1. That's my destination that was created. It's an NSX-T edge. So it doesn't have load balancing enabled yet. It's actually creating things, and it will establish layer 2 bridging, which is currently doing. So it's here.
Yep.
When it does that, it's actually checking if the layer 2 bridging is working. So that's what it's doing now to verify that bridging is working between source and destination.
Yeah.
And then it will continue configuring DFW in the data center group. It will configure load balancing. It will switch north-south traffic, and then it will move the VMs.
So at this present time, would the customer still be able to access their VMs?
Yeah. Hold on. Here, I'm connected to my VMs.
Okay, cool. So there's no outage in networking at this point.
Yeah. And here I still have access to my application.
So to be clear, when VCD is connected here to an NSX-T cluster and a NSX-V cluster, when the migration is complete, VCD has the knowledge to know that all of the load balancing functions, the networking, all of the organization networking for that particular tenant or that org is now being controlled by NSX-T, and you'll just automatically relay the commands to NSX-T rather than V.
Yeah, well, the north-south switching is handled like externally of VCD when the NSX-T edge gateway starts to announce the routes.
Mm-hmm.
And everything inside is just propagated during the topology replication. And I will show you at the end of the migration how it's done. There is a little trick for load balancing. It's actually providing an intermediate logical segment, and then it's NATing to that logical segment.
Sure. Is there any clearing of routing above the edge that would be advisable for the service provider to run, or is it going to be pretty seamless?
No, if it's dynamic routing, it's quite seamless.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, should we come back to it when it's complete and have a little look around?
Yeah.
All right. And we're back. Amazingly, we've jumped time and it's now done.
Yeah, it was not that long. It was just to spare 15 minutes, but...
Absolutely. All right, let's have a look at it then.
Okay, so in a typical migration, the migration tool just stops after it has successfully migrated the workloads to the NSX-T cluster.
Yeah.
But at that moment, you still have the NSX-V constructs, but they will be empty. So if I log as a tenant admin now, here, I have actually two of VDC. So the one at the right is the source one, and the one in the left is the destination one. How do I know? It's because during the migration, and the migration is not finished, everything is appended with -t. So in the source or VDC, I have nothing left. My VApp and my VMs are gone. I still have the networking objects, though. I still have my networks, my edges, but the edge is actually disconnected from the physical network. And I still have everything configured in the destination. So we can quickly check my application is still available, but everything switched to NSX-T. So this IP, that's the VIP IP, has actually switched to NSX-T and NSX Advanced Load Balancer. So now I said that we have the opportunity to check if everything is working as expected. And then if yes, you can launch the migration tool again with the dash cleanup argument. And then it will clean the source objects and it will rename the destination object.
Is there any reason why the storage variable on the destination is consuming more?
No, I think that's just oh well, if I remember correctly, the catalog is still on the source.
Okay.
So the catalog with my catalog VM is still in the source for the moment.
Okay.
Just don't know how to check that. I don't know. I would have to connect to vCenters and to check that.
Okay.
So in terms of destination, my VMs are here. They have kept their metadata. They are connected to a similar network. It's just appended with -v2t. They are connected to something called T1 demo edge 1, which is here. So now it's a NSX-T edge. And if I check NAT, so the NAT is configured just like the NSX-V NAT. So I have my source NAT here and my two destination NAT here and there. Firewall is the same. Yes. So we allow, and then distributed firewall. So in NSX-T, distributed firewall is done on a data center group and not at the org VDC level. So data center group has been created to connect the T1 demo edge 1. And here distributed firewall was enabled. So it's active and it was configured with my rules. So it kept the name and it appended the ID of the rule ID of the source DFW.
Okay.
It created where I had IPs. It created actually IP sets just as objects, which is easier to manipulate than IPs.
Yeah, easier to remember.
So if I check So I didn't log out, and so I didn't even break my SSH session to my web servers. But SSH is quite solid for that. But now, in terms of load balancing, so we can see that here the VIP has been migrated. So the VIP is now on the edge gateway, which is the T1 demo edge. So load balancing is enabled. It connected the service engine group that is mentioned in the YAML file. So this one. It created a pool.
That's the shared group that we saw before, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It means that this group can be shared between multiple edges from the same tenant or from different tenants.
Yep.
A pool of 2 VMs has been created. So 10.2, 10.3. Analytics will ramp up. It's empty for the moment because it was just created on NSX-T, on NSX-ALB. And I have a VIP that was created. So the things that can be a little tricky to understand is that the VIP doesn't actually reflect the VIP that was in NSX-V. And the way the migration tool translated the topology, it created a VIP in a segment that we provided here. And it also added a NAT rule from the VIP address to that internal IP.
Right. Yeah.
On HTTP. So that's how the virtual service was migrated from NSX-V to NSX-ALB.
So it's done quite a lot of work actually at the back end here in terms of creating a number of things for you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. You do definitely need to understand what these things are, so you've got a good knowledge of what's actually going on. Yeah.
And now to finish the migration, we are actually launching the cleanup. So it will do a few things. So it will destroy the layer 2 bridge. So it will free the NSX edges that were acting as a layer 2 bridging, so that you can reuse them in the next org VDC migration. It will also migrate the catalog items that were still on the source org VDC. So that was, I think, the
16 gig,
16 gig that you could see here.
Which was probably the photon
migrate.
image.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it will destroy completely every source object. So you don't have the ability to roll back after that, after the cleanup option. And it will rename all NSX-T objects by removing the -T or the -V2T on the object.
I was going to ask about that because that may be important if you're doing any alarm translation or metering systems. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a few things to mention that, like the VApp UUID is maintained, the VMs UUID are maintained. The only thing that are not maintained are the new objects. Everything like edges, networks, data center groups, firewall rules, and so on, because those are new in NSX-T. So
yeah. Okay.
But everything related to the workload are maintained. So it copied my template photon tree. It created a catalog on the destination. So now we see that the storage is empty in the NSX-V one, and it's deleting now the NSX-V objects.
Okay.
It will last for like 5 minutes and then it's done. And when you are done, you can just rinse and repeat. So you can clear the YAML file or update the YAML file with the next org VDC that you want to migrate.
Can you rename or create a YAML file separately for every org VDC? You can, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would actually suggest doing that. That's why I have a separate one for this particular demo bench. But I would suggest to have specific YAML file per org VDC.
Right. So I guess the advice here is if you're using load balancing to get familiar with the NSX Advanced load balancing concepts and terminology, because you're going to need to pre-configure your service engine groups. So that's going to be important. The second thing is you do need to do this in a maintenance window, because there will be some blip in the network connectivity.
Yes.
Yeah. There we go.
So
it's done.
here it's done. It's renamed. My networks are renamed. My edges have the same name. You're done.
And I guess the other thing is, if you're charging for distributed firewalling today, or you're doing anything around rules or NAT or DHCP pools, all of those IDs are going to be net new. So you're going to need to interrogate the system and get those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. But essentially, all of the metadata that's with the VM has traveled with the VM and the VApp across.
Yes, exactly. So I have, I think, I had two metadata. Superman is Clark Kent and Batman is Bruce Wayne, in case you didn't know.
Okay, we missed that at the start, but hey, that's good. All right, brilliant. That's really cool. So 1.2 is out. Any kind of points to note remain in terms of words of caution and advice from your side of playing with the tool? I know you've only had like a day to play with it, not even a day, but
this morning.
Yeah, this morning. So I really appreciate you recording this so early and so soon. Any things that you think that providers need to be aware about? I mean, we talked about the NSX Advanced load balancing preparation, and I think there's definitely some awareness that's needed there. Is there anything else?
Well, I'm a huge fan of RTFM, so there's the user guide. It's like 30 pages. In case you're not familiar enough with NSX-T, it also shows you how to prepare the edge cluster for bridging, if you want, with screenshots. It also describe the interop matrix, like with exact versions, also with the exact versions where you're at, if you can migrate DHCP or VRF or load balancers and so on. And it also lists in details what are the supported features and what are the unsupported features. So
and just
I would suggest starting here. And if you are interested into the exact process, here it's the 60 steps of the migration are described in details.
And just from NSX-V is effectively not going to have any new functionality built into it, and is going out of support next year, 2022. Yes. So this is something that providers now, with January 21 at the moment, need to start planning and thinking about. What in terms of additional things? We've got the script. We've got obviously going to have to get NSX-T sorted out. How does that look in terms of clusters and connectivity? Is there any guidance on how that can be set up as well?
Any guidance? Not well. There are guidance in the user guide. It describes that it needs to be 2 vSphere cluster under the same vCenter, under the same VCD instance. The versions are quite important, so you have really, because it's not some of the versions matrix are not working at all. Others are working but have not been tested. So if you stick to the versions that are supported, you should be okay.
Okay.
There is one consideration, is that if you have shared storage between NSX-V and NSX-T cluster, it's a simple vMotion.
Right.
If you have non-shared storage, for example, vSAN between both clusters, it's a storage and a vMotion.
Okay.
It's both at the same time. Here in my case, I'm using vSAN, so it took me migrating. So it took me like 4 minutes to migrate 30 gigs.
Yeah.
In my nested environment, which is a lab. So yeah, shared storage is a consideration to have. Otherwise, just do some tests about how external networks are working in NSX-T, how load balancing is handled using NSX-ALB, and just test it.
Yeah, and obviously also make sure any monitoring systems that you're using are, able to pick up the same, if they're, if they're looking for UUIDs, for example, or metadata tags. Make sure that's all good. Make sure your billing systems are still able to bill and able to pick up the new pieces. And yeah, okay, good. That's kind of pretty much it from my view. Excellent. Thank you very much, Romain, again, for spending time today go through this, and I really appreciate this. Was a quick one. We wanted to get this out as soon as possible so we can get people to start playing with the tool and start testing. As you say, testing is absolutely critical in these environments, so make sure you do. And thank you again, Romain. Really appreciate it.